Protesters and trans activists have clashed on the steps of Tate Britain following the gallery's decision to host a drag queen event for children. Families had previously raised concerns about the gallery hosting drag queens to provide half-term entertainment. Protesters organised a demonstration outside the Tate where they were met by counter-protests led by a coalition of trans rights campaigners. Joining me now is former Eton teacher and cultural commentator Will Noland. And still with me is broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eben. So, Will, should Drag Queen Story Hour be banned?
I think there's a strong case for banning it, Calvin, and the reason for that is that its purpose would seem to be encouraging in children an attitude towards gender identity that could potentially be damaging. Now, if academics want to have these kinds of conversations amongst themselves and not promote these views to children, that's one thing. But what is its purpose if not to suggest to children that there's fluidity in gender such that a man can become a woman and there's no material difference between the two of them? I'm not clear what the aim of it is.
Well, Will, how is it damaging?
Well, to put it bluntly, a man cannot become a woman, nor vice versa. And there are all kinds of potentially damaging consequences from adopting that view. And the idea that this is about free speech is a curious one, because I used to work at a charity, Eton College, and the lecture that was deemed gross misconduct for its content argued the opposite point of view, which is that biological sex is immutable and we can't change this. And that was deemed too dangerous for 16, 17-year-olds, very intelligent students to hear because a member of staff found it offensive. And yet here are much younger children being presented with what seems to be the opposite viewpoint. So it's not about
juxtaposition. Very interesting juxtaposition there. Andrew, I'm guessing you would consider this art?
I think, well, I'll tell you what I consider, and I like to play devil's advocate because it's important, as Will points out in his patriarchy paradox, to make sure that you do get many different views expressed. If you actually go to the Tate Moderns website, you'll find out what this event is all about, rather than looking at the shocking headlines. And there's a drag artist called Ada HD, who suffers, I understand, with ADHD, and basically they're reading stories to children. And one of the things I went to this Christmas was to go and see Ian McKellen in Mother Goose. And the whole pantomime season and form of people dressing up in drag as a form of entertainment was exactly that. The question which we need to look at, and I haven't seen in any reports about it, is what material is being read. So if it's done in the form of entertainment, that has got to be okay. And to turn around and address issues such as ADHD, diversity, celebrating individuality is fine. If the material is not suitable, and it's a point that Will touches on, as I say, in that brilliant video, which got him into all sorts of trouble, then I think that's the thing we should look at and address that appropriately.
Interesting point. I just want to state it's Tate Britain, not Tate Modern.
Sorry.
But it's not the content that's important. Well, the content is important, but not just the content. It's who's reading the content. And the question keeps coming up, not why do children need to be read to by drag queens, but why do drag queens so keenly want to read to children? Will, I want to ask you about the media coverage around this, though, because even the Daily Mail has pushed the far-right angle. Now, I've seen people holding signs saying, leave our kids alone. Doesn't strike me as particularly far-right. I even saw Piers Corbyn there, certainly not far-right. Can you tell us your take on how it's been covered so far?
It is worrying, you're right, that people who are rightly concerned that there might be children who are too young for these kinds of ideas to be presented to them, being exposed to them. So if this is far right, then what we've got is a really interesting shifting of the Overton window. It's moved so far left that views that most people would rightly consider common sense now being described as far right, and the average man on the street will find himself labelled far right simply from standing still while political discourse shifts further and further left. You'll remember that J.K. Rowling, for example, received death threats and was seen as a far right figure by many for just saying that there really is a material difference between a biological woman and a man with a trans woman.
It comes back to bringing common sense back. Thank you very much for that. That's former Eton teacher and cultural commentator Will Noland and broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eben. Thank you both. A spokesman from the Tate said, "We do not programme artists in order to promote particular points of view, nor to reconcile differing points of view. Our galleries offer a broad programme and visitors have the freedom to choose which aspects of it they engage with."